Ready. Come on, JB. Oh,
welcome to Stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. Shut up. I'm Bradshaw. That would be your Chickasaw native, your Chickasaw Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, for whatever that's worth, Mr. Gerald Brisco.
Well, thank you, JB. What a pleasure it is.
Wait a minute. I hadn't introduced Arn. He's our guest.
Me?
Yeah, but you're not supposed to talk yet.
Okay, thank you. How long you been doing this?
A Hall of Famers, Hall of Fame, Mr. Arn Anderson, one of the greatest workers of all time.
Thank you.
One of the greatest guys of all time, and an agent that I love dearly, a person I love dearly, Mr. Arn Anderson.
And if you remember, I was a honorary APA member.
100%. Me and Ron gave him the honorary status of being an APA member.
That's a big deal. That was a big deal.
Really, because I never got that, and I knew them both too. How did you get that? What do you?
Because we knew you.
Well, come to think of it, I'm glad I didn't. I love Arn. I love Arn, of course. And your partner, Ron Simmons, damn, I love him so much. But I don't know about you. You're a Texan, so it's hard to get along with you. So
let me tell you how good he is with names. So he calls me and he goes, "Hey, we want you to induct Fat Boy's brother." That's how he introduced Tom. That's all he can say. Well, he called me and said, "We want you to induct Bruce." Fat Boy's brother.
Exactly. They knew who he is.
I knew who it was. Yeah, I knew who it was.
Us fat guys have an alliance. We all know who each other is.
Yeah. So anyway, Arn, man, it's great to have you here, and congratulations, man. Last night, Brock, your son, you had your family here, and you got inducted to the Traeger Hall of Fame here in Waterloo, Iowa, the Dan Gable Museum. What a museum they got here. Wrestling history everywhere you look. And last night we were honored Pat O'Connor. Who remembered Pat O'Connor out there? One of the greatest of all time. Of course, Darla does. She knows all of them. But Pat O'Connor from New Zealand. And, Pat, I think Tony Gurria stole part of Pat's hair back in the sheep days. We had Tony Gurria here, the guy with the walking hair piece. And JBL claims he gets up every morning and irons it because he's getting a little follically challenged too. I got to warn him all the time. Don't bend over in the bright lights here. But Arn, I want to congratulate you again. What a fantastic introduction by your son last night, and some of the comments that you made about our family life, and take care of home in the beginning there. Was just, it hits close to home there, and those words came from your heart there. But tell us a little bit how you feel when I surprised you on your show and told you. I mean, he said, "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say." I said, "Say yes, damn it. That's all you got to say."
Well, Paul Bromwell, who, along with Marcus, they pretty much run everything that I do as far as website, everything. As you can imagine, I'm not really good on computers and such. Single finger digiting.
I watched him when we first got computers at WWE. Arn was sitting to Brisco, "How do you turn this thing on?" I taught him how to turn it on. About 20 minutes later, he looked at me again. "Brisco, how do you turn this thing on again?"
That's a whole nother story. We could do a whole show about the introduction of computers. What was the question?
How you had last night, the Hall of Fame induction?
Yeah, it feels like to me, the longer you're out of the wrestling end of it and you're in the office end, but doing this, get the opportunity to do this kind of stuff, you get a little closer to it. You get close to all the people. And it seems like when we're up there as recipients, I know it was my issue, and I know it was Brock's. You're sitting there you're scared to death. Guys, I was scared to death last night. Brock did, I think, a phenomenal job for the experience that he has around this business, but he was brought up the right way to respect it and love it. It gave us everything we have on this earth, and you guys were a big part of that. But there was one part that always seemed like, not by design, but just because it turns out that way, the most important part of this entire group of wrestling-related people, talent, production, fans, everybody, is the wives. They do everything, and they never get the proper due. You know, those of us that have been married for 39 years, 44, and the biggest overachievement of all,
You skipped over JBL.
Mr. Bradshaw and his lovely missus. How long? How many years? 20 years. In this business, there's not a lot of us, so we could probably put them in one small cab, the number of guys that have been married. Yeah, over 20 years. So I just wanted to make sure that the ladies and the wives and the long-term girlfriends and the children got their due. Was the second goal, besides thanking everyone involved with this great event and having me here. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Brisco was supposed to be a groomsman in my wedding, and he called me the night before, and he said, my son made the state wrestling tournament. I can't make it. I'm sorry. I said, well, Mr. Brisco, that's much more important. And he goes, I promise I'll come to your next wedding.
We're all betting on that.
I mean, John one like he married above his raising there, so we're happy for him, and he turned into a good man because he had a good woman there, and we appreciate Meredith for changing whatever she could do to John. But they send me Christmas cards, and the last Christmas card I got, I think he got to her a little bit because they're standing out in front of their Wall Street mansion, 5-story house, and 15 people waiting on them, and they're dressed like cowboys. Meredith's a New York girl, and John's got her wearing a cowboy hat, Arn. A cowboy hat, a damn Wall Street guru. The Oracle of Wall Street is wearing a cowboy hat now because she's married to a damn Texan, Arn.
Do you think any of those Wall Street types, when they walk past JBL on whatever street it is in New York, have any idea the bullet they just dodged? This man is criminal. Criminal.
Speaking of wives, when Mr. Brisco had a stroke a few years ago, I called his lovely wife, Barbara, and I said, Barbara, how is Mr. Brisco? She said, oh, my goodness, said he's slurring his words. He doesn't know where he is. I said, that's Friday afternoon.
Oh, God.
That's the backup I have, Arn. That's my partner. You're lucky you work alone, because you don't have that. You got Paul, but you can body slam him. I can't body slam that 6'9", big 450-pound Texan partner that I got.
You know what's sad with my bad back that has occurred here the last decade or so? I don't think I can beat Paul or even Marcus.
Well, Paul's a big guy. Marcus, it would probably take, he's so wary, it'd probably take two of us to get him.
And he's breaking in. Did you know that?
Oh, no, not another one.
Marcus
not another one.
Is trying to break in the wrestling business. So,
Arn, we all know you had one of the Four Horsemen there, but before the Four Horsemen, when you were, I remember being there, and I was trying to think of the guy's name, the police chief there in Athens, Georgia. You knew him pretty well. And I tell you how I know that, because when I was still working, you were just a young puppy running around in the streets of Rome, Georgia. Rome, Georgia. And one of the police chief come up to me. He said, "We got a high school athlete here. He's an outstanding athlete. He's a little crazy. He might fit in your business real well. His name is Martin Lundy." So tell us a little bit about that upbringing there in Rome, Georgia.
Chief Collins, right?
Yeah, John Collins. Yeah, I went quail hunting with him on Jimmy Carter Ranch down in Plains, Georgia, with my bird dogs.
Yeah, he's a big time hunter.
Big time hunter.
Just shows you what a small world it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and now this is way back when you were still a kid in high school.
Yeah, I wanted to be a wrestler since I was 8 years old, and I have a very clear memory of just how I fell in love with it. But Rome's a small town, and there was like a McDonald's on one side of town and McDonald's on the west side of town. I went to East Rome. West Rome was the enemy, and you either had a date, went to the movies, or you bought a six-pack illegally, slugged it down, and found somebody to fight.
And you had a lot of those six-packs, I understand.
I drank a lot of six packs and did a lot of fighting.
That's
But
what the police chief told me.
yeah, and I went to jail a couple of times.
That's how he knew you so well.
It happens, and that's where, they would, that Lundy kids on the way back in, and public drunk, fighting at McDonald's. But it was just an outlet, being frustrated, wanting to be a wrestler, to be honest with you. And thank God I ran into Ted Allen. Some of you will know that name. Fantastic performer, right?
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. And
Use your microphone, Dave.
I ran into him just by chance, and I just said, Mr. Allen, I recognize you off TV, and what would a guy like me have to do to do what you do? Now, if I would have asked that to him or asked myself that, we would have probably said, you can't do what I do, you dipshit. That's the way we felt about the business, and somebody asking to just walk in the door. So I couldn't believe it when he said that he was going to break me in, and he did it the right way. And that was my very first getting to be a wrestler. Now, day one, we did just a little bit of drilling, and just out of nowhere, he said, here, stand in front of me and just relax your knees a little bit. Look down and make sure your knees are bent a little bit. And he scooped me up and slammed the piss out of me. I mean, hard. And I just remember.
And you had never taken a bump before or anything.
No, never taken a bump. And I just raised up and went, oh, God, I have screwed up badly.
I really want this.
And as an introduction to the business, and he got me my first break. And I've had people help me along the way. The list was so long we couldn't even get to it here. But
Do you remember your first match?
first match was Atlanta TV, just getting creamed. I think his name was Deke Rivers. Does that ring a bell?
Deep Rivers.
Deke Rivers. Maybe not.
No.
But anyway, it was just to come down and get thumped in Atlanta, and just being on TV, coming back to Rome and catching it when it aired at 6:05. You see yourself wrestling on TV, and that's really what you wanted to do your entire life, it's a surreal feeling. Even though I didn't get one offensive move, it's still a surreal feeling. And it's just been a love affair ever since.
How did you go from that, the first TV, did you go to a territory right away? What did you do first to get into the business?
Maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I was doing TV every week. Ted got us booked every week, tackling dummies. And it just so happened that about the 4th week, I had a partner, and we were wrestling the Armstrongs, Bob and Brad. And I guess it was because I was from Rome and Bob was from Marietta, and he was asking me a little bit, how long you been working? And I just told him, I've had 3 or 4 matches. He said, okay, well, Brad will do a little something with you. He didn't say I'll do a little something with you.
Bob was a smart veteran.
And so they gave me the opportunity just to do a couple of little things. And when the match was over, he went, how long you say you've been? I haven't seen you around. How long you been working? I said, 4 matches. He says, well, you know what? I'm the booker down in Pensacola, and I could use you for about 3 weeks. If you're interested, do you have a job? And I said, yes, sir, I do. I'm working as a meat cutter at a grocery store for Warehouse Groceries. And he said, well, that's a pretty good job. And in Rome, Georgia in those days, that was a good paying job, I said, with all due respect, Mr. Armstrong, I don't want to be a butcher. I want to be a wrestler. I'll quit. He said, no, don't quit. I said, I already did. So he brought me down to Pensacola 3 weeks. When the 3 weeks was up, he says, you want to continue this, I hope? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, what if I get you booked for Bill Watts? When did 2 TVs for Bill? Same conversation. I've had 3 weeks experience. He says, well, go home and pack and come back. I could probably use you in an underneath spot for, we'll see, a few months. Home, packed my bags, took off, and I worked for Bill for 5 months. I think I had 1 conversation with him, Matt Bourne, Ted DiBiase, and Jim Duggan were the Rat Pack.
Wow.
And boy, they were top guys, and they were red hot in Louisiana. Well, the time came where the run was over. They were going to get Bourne a partner, send him to Atlanta, and they had a manager in mind, which was unknown then. His name was Paul Ellering. This story's about to get good. So
Business is picking up.
yeah, and so they, we're sitting around at TV, and everybody was in one room for Bill Watts, and he's talking to Bourne. He said, "We got to get you a partner, and we'll see. You got any ideas?" And nobody had any ideas, and just out of the blue, a voice, "Hey, Bill. Lundy looks just like old Anderson. Won't you send him and make him an Anderson?" That was the Junkyard Dog. Wow. Bill looked over and went, "Dog, that's a great idea. Lundy, I'll talk to you next TV." Next TV, I came back and he said, "You'll be partners with Bourne. You'll finish up in 2 weeks and send you to Atlanta and put you with Ellering." Had it not been for JYD, I might have never been anything. So that's how stuff happens in this business.
And were you worried about Ole Anderson giving you the thumbs up or thumbs down on it?
Oh, God, yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, so as the story and the saga, continues, I get there way too early, TBS, when I'm supposed to start. I think I beat the night watchman there.
Was that the back in the old Techwood Avenue days?
Yeah, remember the offices there? So I'm in there, I'm sitting in the dark. And everybody
comes
comes
in. Literally the dark hallways there. Cold.
Oh, God, yeah. So they come in, and Matt Bourne comes in, and then Paul comes in. He comes over and introduces himself. Ole comes in, goes in his office. They call us in. I walk in, and Ole looks up and said, "Damn, you do look like me."
Ooh, I'm sorry, Arn.
I didn't know if that was good or bad.
He said, "I'd take it from me." I wonder.
So he says, he rocks back, and just this quick, I guess he had been thinking about it. He goes, "I tell you what, we'll give it a try, and we're going to call you Arn Anderson." That's how I was born that day.
Wow.
Just like that.
And right away they introduced you as
cousin of Ole Anderson, or nephew, or one of those things. They call me about 3 different things, from brothers to nephews to you call it. And from that day, it was a gift, and a hell of a gift being an Anderson. And
did you ever know Lars?
I've never met Lars Anderson.
Wow. How old he is?
Yes.
Lars, you multiply that about 20 times and you got Lars.
Well, then I'm okay not meeting him.
Yeah. Lars, I love our Lars. I mean, one of our podcast associates there, a friend, and dear friend, John and mine, and probably your Dutch Mantel, he has a lot of stories about it. Dutch and our Lars were in a program down. Lars was just beating the holy crap out of Dutch every night. So finally, holy cow, we're going to lose. I thought Dutch had a pretty good look and had some talent in him. But finally, Lars one night in Miami just mutilated poor Dutch. And Dutch was new. You know how we all are when we're new? We don't really fight back a lot. You let the veteran do something. Dutch knew why he was there. He was there to get Lars over with. So I just finally I was working in the office there. Dutch come in. I mean, he was ready to throw him down. Finally, you get to the point where you gotta stand up for yourself, right? And back there. So finally, he had reached that tipping point. So I looked over at the Dutch. I said, "Dutch, don't worry about it. I'll hand up office." So Lars comes in. Lars starts bitching, start going toward. I'd step in. Lars, I said, No, not here. Me first, and then him. And Lars backed off and he sat down. And I was thankful for him. But he was one of those guys he was worse than Ole.
Wow.
Dutch told a young guy one day I was working with him, he goes, "There's only 2 things you can't do." And the kid said, "What's that?" He said, "Heel or baby face."
That sounds like an Arn Anderson quote.
Wow, that's so good.
Dutch would say, "Good God Almighty, could you hit me with your shoot punch? Because your working one's killing me."
Killing me.
Oh gosh.
So you're there. You finally get Ole's approval. You have what was your first match as an Anderson?
I just wrestled high school,
Uh-huh.
Rome, and to be honest with you, different era, different time. It was because the wrestling coach, I played football, played linebacker, and played guard. Those days you played both ways. And he said, wrestling coach, who was also the lineman coach, says, okay, you're going to be wrestling. What weight class you want to wrestle on? What are you talking about? Well, if you're going to play football, you're going to wrestle. You got to have an alternate sport, stay in shape in the off season. Okay, so he got me started, and it was the hardest thing I had ever done. Amateur wrestling. If you don't respect amateur wrestlers, guys, it is the toughest sport in the world, bar none. There's no more miserable feeling than being in class all day, not being able to eat lunch, starving to death, and then going in a hot, sweaty field house that's probably 110 degrees and wrestling with a plastic top on.
Amen on that. So that's your high school. So we're in Atlanta. We're at TV now, and then Ole gives you that approval. Then you guys go out and what who you remember?
So they put Paul with us, and they gave us a good push. And for about 5 months, it was just every week on TV.
Are you teaming up with Ole at the time?
No, I'm teaming with Matt Bourne.
Matt Bourne, okay.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of what ifs, because in this business, if one piece moves, it could have changed the course of history and the entire business. This, I think, is one of those deals, because, I mean, we did really well. Paul meshed good with Matt and myself. Matt, I don't think, was ever happy with the fact that a rookie got that spot as his partner, and he let me know a few times, but he got in some trouble, and Matt got fired. Now, Ole is going, well, shoot, instead of just giving me another partner, Ole goes up to Minnesota to the gym that had the Road Warriors and all of those guys. So all of a sudden, 2 guys show up at TV. Ole calls me in, says, Arn, I don't know what to do with you, so we brought in a team. We're going to put them with Paul Ellering, and we're going to do something else with you. Now, had Matt Bourne not gotten in trouble and gotten fired, Ole wouldn't have went to Minnesota. We might not have ever had the Road Warriors. Wow. That's pretty stout. Pretty stout what if.
There's so many ifs in our business.
Yeah.
The guy gets hurt, and you never know what's going to happen. So there's just so many ifs in our business.
And
that's what makes it so
that gym was amazing, wasn't it?
Oh God,
that's where JBL trained too, by the way.
That's right. I trained there with Brad Ryan, so I worked out at that gym. But it was you had a list of how many people had bench pressed 500 pounds. It was incredibly long. That was 30 years ago.
It was a true monster factory, wasn't it?
It was a true monster factory. It was unbelievable.
And put out some top talent over the years. If you look at all the guys that did well in this business from Minnesota, the list is about this long.
Yeah, John and I've had a couple of those guys on, and we've had them name the guys, and it takes 5 minutes to name all those guys. I mean, that little high school in Minnesota, it produced so many guys. It's like that town in Canada, Hamilton, Ontario. You look at the list from Hamilton, Ontario, it's just phenomenal with the great talent. Same with that Minnesota high school.
Yeah. Robbinsdale,
I believe.
Yeah, that's where Henning and all the guys are from. Yeah. And they all trained at that gym, which was
that was a hardcore gym, huh?
If you brought a drug test within a city block of that gym, it would have melted.
A drug dog would OD there.
A drug dog would have passed out and died if it had walked to that gym.
They were all on creatine.
Yeah, they were on IcoPro.
IcoPro, yeah.
You're I can't. I'll tell it later when the camera's not on.
So you're afraid you might get fired?
yeah. There's so much time left.
Go ahead, John.
we got a payoff one day at Madison Square Garden, and it was probably a quarter of what we should have gotten. I mean, it was a quarter of what we should have gotten, but it was at a time with WCW during the wars and everything. And then when we got that payoff, you're like looking at it, go, the hell is this? Because the Garden was how we made our living. We weren't making big money back then. That was a big payoff. And we get the payoff, and it's like a quarter of what it should have been. You got to be kidding me. And underneath it was a memo that drug testing has been suspended. You're like, oh, fuck it. This is great.
The beauty of WCW in its infancy, they didn't know what they were doing. But they had guaranteed contracts. And if you didn't work one day, got your check every 2 weeks. And that kind of security, these guys, I'll tell you, was never before had it happened. We didn't think it was possible. They're going to pay me for 2 weeks to sit home, if that was the case. But that's all you were going to get if the house was 50,000 people. Unless you're in that upper crust of Hogan and Sting and those guys,
right.
Regular top guys or middle guys or top guys or underneath guys. Whatever your contract said, that's what you got every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and if we got draws during that time, $200 draws, Timmy Wyatt would give us the draws or Arnie would give them to us. And a lot of times we'd owe the company $50 back.
Yeah, I never will forget, guys coming in Brisco. I got a minus $200 check. What happened? I said, well, how many draws you get? Well, that counts against us. You're getting money, aren't you? That's a wrestler's math, though, right? Our math isn't a regular school math.
Well, they didn't even ask you. They would just come and try to hand you $200. Yeah, right. I knew me. I was going to the bar if they hand me 200 cash. That I didn't have to tell Mama about. I forgot they sent the check stub to the house. She did all the bills, but yeah, it was a different deal back then.
John and I were talking the other day about these guaranteed contracts. Of course, they were my time was way before the guaranteed contract. Big money contract. I mean, guys were getting you always had to deal with the promoter. Well, I need X amount of dollars to get by to come there. And you usually met that. And you knew they were through with you when you started going below that threshold, when okay, I need $700. So the next week, you're $700. All of a sudden you've been there a while and you're getting $650. Well, ding, 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 the bell starts going off. Maybe it's time for me to start looking someplace else. So,
yeah.
That was the kind of the contracts we had, and when I was starting out, it's kind of just a promise from the promoter. I'll meet what your minimum that you need, and that's all you got too. You very seldom got about it. Then all of a sudden, these big fat contracts started coming out. What stage of your career was that when the contracts really started getting healthy?
The first 3 years I was with WCW, and they were kind of learning their way, and they were using the talent from Crockett in those days. And then it started to get about 96, I want to say. It's when the Hogan push started, and they brought in Savage and all those guys. And that's when the money changed. Mm-hmm. Business started to pick up. Pay-per-view business started to pick up. Guys could ask for more money. But the one mistake I think that was made is they brought Hogan in, and they were just determined to be pushing Hogan, but they forgot on the other side of the ball, they're not putting any heat on any heels and developing a pecking order of those heels waiting in line to get to Hogan. So he never had a contest that there was a heel they thought could beat him. Right. And it went on for years.
What were you thinking during that time? 'Cause I know what we were thinking. I mean, we had just lost Hall and Nash. We just lost Brett, and I'd never seen guys leave a territory like that before. I thought we were dead. I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen. I remember Lanza was sitting there one day and he said, "Hey kid, as long as that guy's there, we're fine." Talking about Vince. He goes, "We've lost Ultimate Warrior. We've lost Hogan. He will get us through this, you know." But I didn't have that same confidence because I saw our houses weren't that good. Your houses were great. What were you thinking during that time about this war? Or did you think that WCW was going to end up putting WWE out of business?
I never thought that.
Really?
Yeah, I never thought that, because remember I had that 14-month run that I wrestled, Tully and I's Brainbusters. So I kind of got a feeling for Vince and the way he ran his business and the way that machine operated and all that stuff. So I had that to fall back on thought-wise. But I never one time, I thought it was one of the stupidest comments ever when somebody says in a room full of people, "I'm going to put Vince McMahon out of business." Ignorant comment. You must not know the man. He wasn't going to roll over and play dead. What he did was he stayed the course. He picked his 5 guys, and that's the 5 guys that he went with, instead of on the other side of the ball, that one guy still was the, final say.
You know what was amazing during that time was, like, so I got WWE in '95 and business was terrible. We couldn't give away tickets. Remember, we ran Reunion Arena one time, had under 1,000 people there. They talked about running the Sportatorium, but Vince didn't want to run it because it was bad image, running something like that. But we had all the guys that later became the Attitude Era, that drew big money. Stone Cold was the ringmaster. Kane was the dentist. Triple H was an aristocrat. We had all these guys, but they were in the wrong role. Hall and Nash were with us, but they were Diesel and Razor. And then all of a sudden business took off. But it wasn't like somebody came along that changed the business. It wasn't like all of a sudden Hogan emerged in the 80s and WrestleMania starts. It was the crew that was already there. Your guys' crew was already there. Business just got rock hot during that time off the talent that was already there. And I always thought that was an amazing thing, that nothing really transformative happened. It's just people figured out where to put these guys.
You know what? They all kind of fell into character, and they became that character. And as we know, the guys, think about it, the guys that have gotten over in this business throughout history, if you put them in a room and figured out who they really were, they're pretty much that guy. It's just a smidgen of embellishment, and once they were able to become themselves and have the opportunity to to go get it, they just did.
Yeah, our part of our modern day business, the modern day wrestling, as most of the fans know it today. You're sitting there, your Ole Anderson nephew, cousin, or whatever at this time there. When did the thought of the Four Horsemen start developing, and how did that develop?
So after the Road Warriors decapitated me for about 3 weeks, Ole goes, "I don't know what I can do, with you. I can get you booked out, no problem. What do you want to do?" I just said, "No problem." I went to the payphone, called Bob Armstrong. I'd worked the 3 weeks for Bob previously, and he said, "Well, God, yeah." He said, you want to start Monday in Birmingham?" "I sure will." 14 months there. That's where I met my wife in Pensacola, Continental Wrestling. And for that 14 months that I was there, number one, that was a long time for a heel to be in a small territory, right?
Yeah.
Because, you can only get beat so much, they lose interest. So you had to be on top of your game. Ric Flair had been coming down in and out a couple of times, and he says, "We need you in Charlotte. Jimmy Crockett is fixing to, Vince McMahon's making a move. Jimmy Crockett's going to make a move. We need you in Charlotte." He talked me into going there. Finished up with in Pensacola, which was a paradise, by the way. Went to Charlotte. Day one, I broke a guy's arm on TV. Manny Fernandez came down, slid in the ring. I backed off. He went to see about the guy, nailed him, threw him out to the floor, and dropped him on the rail. That was my introduction. That was a pretty strong
Hell of an
first
introduction.
TV. And they were using Manny really good at the time. He was partners with Dusty, for God's sake.
Manny was a great worker.
Yeah,
He really was. Yeah, and, he had that attitude about him. But again, if, like Gerald says, if he whacked you, you whack him back, you're good.
So then when did you end up going, that was where you went back to WCW at that point?
No. Oh God, no. That was in '85. So I started working Ole at some point. I'm not sure, 4 or 5 months. They talked into coming back. He and I teamed up, and we worked a little bit. We went back to Georgia, tried to refurbish the northern Michigan, West Virginia, Ohio run. That failed. Went back to Charlotte, and that's when we started the Four Horsemen gimmick.
What was the conversation leading up to that?
You know how the Four Horsemen were born?
No, I'm asking.
And this is the God's truth. Being a God-fearing man, we were on a promo with Tony Schiavone, and it was Ole, Tully, myself, Ole, and JJ, and we had 3 minutes for all of us to talk about our matches. And I'm just sitting here, and Tully started, I think, and then Ole said a little something, Rick said a little something. I'm just sitting here thinking, my God, what am I going to say to button this up? For some reason, I counted heads, 4 guys. I went, it's like in the good book it says, 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Never has there been so much damage done. I'm paraphrasing, to so many by so few. And I just went, don't ask me where it came from.
Wow.
I swear I do not know where it came from. It just popped in there. And after the promo shut down, Tony Schiavone was right here. Shoo! Jesus, Arn, you just named you guys. I did? Yeah, man, that works. In 2 weeks' time, believe it or not, of TV and doing this, even though we were heels, the fans were doing it.
Everybody in the country were doing it.
Yeah, they
Everybody
really
in
were.
the country to this day
does
it. I mean, it's one of the most iconic symbols in wrestling.
Yeah,
better than that, I guess. You have a,
Yeah, and the other good thing is, thank God you're not from Oklahoma. You go, we 3 horsemen. Wait a minute. 1, 2. Shit.
Well, Arn said he had to look around and count. That was that wrong Georgia education.
well, yeah, I couldn't just picture it in my head and count without looking around. 1, 2, okay.
Just to double check. 1, 2.
You guys are back there.
Stop moving.
I saw moving.
So we had a hell of a run.
Hell of a run, I'll say so.
But you guys weren't always together. I mean, you guys were the Four Horsemen, but it wasn't like you guys were just a faction
They
the whole
wreaked
time.
havoc against everybody on the roster, Don.
I know they did, but they weren't always like they still were individual champions. Well, the first time
Don't get hot.
I ain't
Holy
getting
cow.
hot. I screwed you up with the counting to 4 is
You
what I did.
man. I'm so confused. Now, what number were you?
I forgot what y'all said.
I did too.
I get out of a lot of hot predicaments that way. I forgot. Yeah, but what you're saying is once we were established as a unit, we could split off in any number of combinations
And then
and
work with one or two.
Work with anybody, right? And the one thing that a lot of people will never understand, you put all these factions together, and the reason a lot of them don't work out or don't get over, in my estimation, is we knew as long as we went out and however many guys were standing on that other apron, if we figured out a way to shine every one of those guys, and it may be 2 loops of shining them, then when we finally got a guy cut off and we started to mug him, that's where the heat was.
Wow, you just said so important philosophy in our business. We figured out a way to shine those other guys before we cut them off.
Absolutely. Make them
That's psychology.
For those that don't know, if they're talented, have never seen them before, they're suddenly superstars because they're bouncing 4 of us around.
And Bubba Dudley, the Dudley brothers. I mean, we love them, but that's their dear friend of ours. Bubba is such a great worker. he one time, and he actually quotes me all the time, not all the time, but every once in a while on Twitter, I see it. A wise man, Gerald Brisco, I don't know where he got the wise, but he once told me, you can't just go out there and beat the crap out of somebody and beat somebody. You got to give the guy a spot. If just give him a little spot, just to give him a little bit of credibility, then beat the crap out of him. Then you're beating somebody. And once Bubba and Devon got that down, they started just up and up and up because they were making their opponents and they're beating the crap out of them.
Be surprised how many young guys today that don't want to accept what you said, don't know what you're talking about, or just
that's too old school.
Refuse to do it.
Yeah.
And there were sometimes time constraints. If you said this to a guy, he would think you were crazy too. If there was 4 opponents, it was an enhancement match for the 4 of us. There's a chance that 2 of those guys might not get in at all. Now, in those days, we just said, guys, we don't have enough time. There's 7 minutes, less entrances and exits. That's not a lot of time. This is for us. Sorry, but you 2 guys may not get in. Well, if you said that to some guys today, what kind of response would you
How do I get my shit in?
Yeah, but what about, well, it ain't about you, pal.
One thing that was so interesting about the Four Horsemen was I've always thought there were 2 kinds of heels. I always thought there was a true heel, like the governor on Walking Dead, just a guy that you hate that has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. But then there's the Four Horsemen heel, which is an attraction heel. And I think they're completely different. The Freebirds were attraction heels. D-Generation X was attraction heels. NWO was attraction heels. They both draw money. Roman Reigns, to me, is an attraction heel. He's headlined 7 or 8 WrestleManias. So it's not like one or the other is the better, but they're distinctly different. The Four Horsemen could be attraction heels, just like the Freebirds could be down in Texas, unless they're wrestling the Von Erichs. But then you could also get heat when you needed to. But that is a complete different heel from somebody that is just a Hot Rod Roddy Piper or an Iron Sheik type or a Sergeant Slaughter when he's Iraqi sympathizer type that was just a pure heel. I just think there's a difference in those type of heels, and a lot of people don't quite understand that.
Well, the common denominator is the one thing is being a heel doesn't mean you're not good, and you can out wrestle a guy a couple of times.
John, turn your phone off. Have you learned yet?
Hey, it's Barry Windham.
So it doesn't mean that you can't wrestle and you can't be competitive. It's the thing that makes a heel is you start to rush in with a guy that you just knocked on his ass and he's up in your grill. It's when you put on the brakes and go, not right now. You don't want that even contact. That's what makes you a heel, and that's when you get over. And you figure out a way to get his back turned, plow him in the back of the head, and you're off and running.
You mentioned about you never thought WCW was going to win the war, or at least put WWE out of business. What did you think during the territory days of Crockett? Because Crockett was the one guy that it appeared that had a chance of fighting off the wave that was coming from the north.
Well, I was very grateful to be there. Jimmy had paid me a nice salary, and I had all, everything was great. But when he started spending money on buying Watts territory, buying Kansas City territory, when he already had the television that he could just run, and it's not like they were actively up and running house shows, so there wasn't that stepping over the line amongst promoters, which was a no-no in the NWA. But he started blowing money on all that stuff, and I just went, this can't, 2 private planes going running these towns that have been dead for years.
Yeah,
huge mistake. And I kind of questioned on him on that to myself. Never said a word to Jimmy. I would have probably still been there, and things would have been still running, I bet you, if he hadn't have put the screw job to Tully and myself.
Really?
You can't. Who are you going to replace Anderson and Blanchard with? I hate to talk about myself in the third party, but at that day and time, that's a pretty gaping hole.
Yeah,
sure,
it's huge. Yeah.
So he just Jimmy got stubborn and started doing a couple of stupid things just because he was the boss. And we had always, there was never a situation where they looked at me and I went, doesn't work for me, brother. Never happened because business is business. But some stuff was just, he made a couple of decisions. Tully and I left, and I just think it left a gaping hole that they were never able to recover from.
We've had a lot of guys on from WCW. We're really not a top guy where we really would get the opinion on somebody. And even though you were in office, you were tight. You were one of the inside guys. Could you feel we had Lex on? Could you feel when the downfall of WCW started coming? Lex told it. We asked Lex this question. Lex said, "I can tell you exactly what I felt when I knew it." He said, every year there's a big show out in Las Vegas where TV stations present their lineup for the upcoming year. He said, I went out there right after AOL bought our who was AOL or Tom? AOL bought them out. He said, I went out there to the preview. He said they flashed this big video montage of all the upcoming shows, and we were the top show on the air, and they were. And all of a sudden, I looked at that montage, and there was no WCW TV show advertised on there. He said that's kind of when I kind of saw the pictures that were falling down. Do you remember, how that happened? The feeling that did you guys realize what was going on?
Well, I could tell when it started to tip a little bit was when we were running live events and guys were no showing. If you bought a ticket to see JBL, if he doesn't make it, I don't give a shit who you put in that substitution spot. Not going to be enough. And our top guys, we had a $600,000, I'll never forget it. I was the agent there, producer. We had a $600,000 house in Chicago at the United Center, sold out. And we actually had the top two matches. Those guys were quibbling and arguing about who was going to win the match. And I mean, it was like, well, I'm not doing it. Well, if he ain't doing it, I ain't doing it for him. And you got $600,000 house. And the fact that they were able to get away with that because I've got to call the office. What do I do here? Well, you just get out of it. Well, you got a DQ in the main event in Chicago in front of $600,000. That stinks to high heaven. And the fact that we're able to get away with it, I could tell right then we're in trouble.
You're in trouble.
That's what killed Germany for us was WCW. Because when business was bad, we went to Germany and we made good money. And we loved going over there, but when WCW had the guaranteed contracts, they had so many guys no-show, it literally killed the country because it was just wrestling to them. It wasn't WWE or WCW, it was just wrestling. So when we would advertise Stone Cold and The Rock, well, now we're starting to not sell out anymore because WCW has had a bunch of no-shows.
Yeah. You can't. It's the worst mistake you can make in the wrestling business is to have no-shows.
That is as a former promoter, to me, that was always the deathbed of a town when guys would start no-showing. You knew something was going on. But you guys had that 83 weeks, which was made famous by Eric Bischoff's podcast, that you guys were kicking ass. And all of a sudden, that 83 weeks, what were you guys thinking, at the end of that thing when, the tables started turning? Was that the cause of it? Guys were just getting full of themselves and starting to no-show, or what contributed to that?
Well, there were some of us keeping our mouths shut and doing our job and working as hard as we always had because we knew we didn't have any say. You had some guys at the top that were quibbling over shit that didn't matter. And I think it was just a me scenario. Let me just protect myself, at this point in time. We lost our first quarter hour just 1/4 hour. I remember very, very clearly. And we get back to the office and we're meeting, and it was the first time we'd even lost a 1/4 hour on that 83 weeks. And the comment from the top was, guys, we can never lose another 1/4 hour. Now, we didn't lose the rating, the overall rating, we still won. But it was like, I thought about that for a second. We can never lose another 1/4 hour. So we get back to the office, and I'm helping Kevin Sullivan book, and Jimmy Hart's in there. And, all of a sudden, the edict came down. Since we can't lose a 1/4 hour, we went to booking dream matches in every segment. Dream matches. No story, no heat for 2 weeks. Pay it off the 4th week or anything like that. It was, we can never lose another 1/4 hour. That's panic talking. If we would have just cooled our jets, and before you know it, once you had given every dream match you could think of in 6 months, now what? You can't double back and make an angle out of it.
And I always thought one of the differences was your top guys were older, and like Hogan, it was not going to have a match that was going to be 20, 30 minutes. Our guys were like Stone Cold and Undertaker, who wanted to work 30, 40 minutes. Yeah. So our guys would deliver on main events at pay-per-views, whereas it was harder for WCW because you had guys who were older and surviving on name recognition.
Very true. Very true. And that group of young guys you're talking about that came into their own, Hunter becoming Triple H, The Rock becoming The Rock, Austin, all those young guys, Undertaker, Kane, you name it. All of a sudden, these stars started to emerge, and by then the momentum had switched.
What a crazy time, though. We always wondered if the audience was split. You guys were doing like a 4.3, we're doing a 4.0 or whatever the ratings were. We always wondered if it was the same people watching both shows. But then when you guys were preempted with the NBA, we did an 8.1 one time. And so we realized that it was legitimately two audiences watching two different shows. I remember there in that time, Monday Night Football actually talked about moving Monday Night Football because we were so big in that Monday Night War with you guys.
You guys realize what a 8 rating is? Does everybody understand?
It'll never happen again.
Never.
You know who was ahead of that 1/4 hour, right? That did the 8.1. Don't look over there, man.
Unless
wait a minute. We got a little dispute here because what started that 1/4 hour was Bradshaw versus Ron Simmons. What ended that 1/4 hour was the Stooges versus Mean Street Posse.
The Stooges, brother.
So with the Rock, Stone Cold, all those guys. In fact, the ratings, because who were there, didn't want to put them up because they didn't want to put us over. So that was the first time they didn't put the ratings up on the wall. Was they didn't want to put us over.
And the fat guy, the brother of Tom Pritchard, came to me. He said, "You know what you guys did last night? No, you guys broke every record we ever had, man.
It was the highest rated 1/4 hour. It was 8.6 was what it was. 8.6, highest rated 1/4 hour.
Yeah.
The Stooges versus Mean Street Posse.
Two old men versus two guys that never been in the ring before.
And two guys who just sat there and talked about beer.
And said, damn.
Yeah. They literally gave so little shit about me or Ron that they said, we're going to put you and Ron out there against each other. I said, that's fine. We wrestled 100 times. It wasn't a big deal. And so I said, can we do a promo? They go, oh, sure. They didn't even care. That's the first time we brought up beer drinking and all this stuff that we had done. We had some fun with it. And ended up, that's what the birth of the APA was. A lot of that was from that promo.
Which gave us some great 1/4 hours. You guys in the bar backstage?
Hell, Timmy White got a new bar every 6 months, man.
Timmy White went from nanotube televisions to a flat screen TV.
You guys have an open bar at Tim's place? Open tab?
Timmy still charged them for a drink.
His Vince would say, I cannot believe I just bought Tim White a new bar.
What did you guys think back in the day? Were you flipping channels between both shows? It has to be the answer, right?
It has to be, because we found that out when you guys were preempted, that it literally doubled the audience. Because I always was of the thought that it was the same people watching both shows. It turned out it wasn't.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say that's Super Bowl numbers.
That's right.
For
That's
our
Super Bowl
business.
numbers. Yeah.
It really is.
And in that day and age, it was Super Bowl number. But nowadays, and it's not because these guys probably aren't drawing the numbers, but the way the ratings are calculated now, those numbers will never be duplicated. So
Never.
we'll hold those
They have
numbers.
social media hits. They have a lot of different ways they measure ratings, and their ratings are just through the absolute roof right now. Congratulations to all of them, but TV's different the way it is now to them. Those ratings will never be equal.
So the end is coming. Do you feel the end is coming when
Were you there when Mr. Brisco fired everybody?
Was that the last show in Panama City?
Panama City, yes.
I was there, and actually I was backstage, and everybody for WCW was like this, walking the halls, walking on eggshells, and Gerald.
Did you guys know what was coming or what?
No, God,
No?
it's a surprise. And you guys came in,
Me, Shane, and Bruce.
Shane.
Shane.
Yeah, that's Shane walked. I saw the three of you guys walking towards me, and I went, "Oh shit!" I don't know if you remember this, and I just went up, shook your hand, and grabbed Shane's hand. He pulled me in and said, "I'll be seeing you a little later." That's all he said.
You're like, cool. We're good.
Let the steam off of that day for me. I could just do what I wanted. Relax. Yeah, but I knew what a pivotal night it was when it all played out, and I got back to my hotel room, and I looked at the trainer, and I looked at Charles Robinson, the referee, and I said, "You guys know what this means, don't you? It'll never be what it was. Business has changed forever."
Yep, that's right.
And it did. That night, it changed forever.
And one thing WWE got out of it, which is pretty cool, the rise of, I always thought, in my opinion, that John Cena had the hardest role in probably the history of wrestling. You went from an attitude era where you could flip off your balls, drink beer, wreck vehicles, to a G-rated era, which is almost impossible to do. I think that's a lot of the problems that Michael Cole
Especially
had.
coming off of what we were
Coming off Warrior, this hot show that we're coming off of where you're allowed to do anything. You got boobs flashing. You got all kinds. You got craziness. All of a sudden, Cena's now this G champion. But the agent of John Cena, for those that don't know, put together all of his matches with AA Mr. Arn Anderson.
Yeah, when they brought him to TV and they had that first rapper thing that kind of went south, and he finally got his character turned around a little bit. Vince called me in his office. He called John in his office. He went, "We're going to start over with John. Arn, he's yours. Teach him how to work." Sound like a pressure position to anybody? Oh shit. And having to convince John that it's a G product and you can't do some of the stuff that we just went through that era, because he didn't understand. He was a young guy in the business, and never forget it. I was having just a little bit of conflict talking with him, nothing heated or anything, but he didn't understand what I was trying to teach him, the simple things. So he's working with Kurt Angle. They do a little something. John drops Kurt. There's a guy out in the audience with one of those big foam fingers deals. John rolls out, and he's got Kurt Angle down, hurt. He rolls out of the ring, goes over the rail, goes out in the crowd, takes the foam finger and folds it into one of these to Kurt. I went, "Oh, Jesus." Well, by the time...
Arn, why did you let him do that?
By the time he handed the foam back, went back over the rail and slid in, there was a pissed off Kurt Angle waiting on him.
Oh, wow.
He beat the absolute piss out of John. They came back through the curtain. He walked up to me. I went, "You know what you did wrong?" He said, "Yep," and just kept walking. Kurt came back. Thank God Kurt was tough enough. He did, it was just a momentary, him just protecting himself. That kid got really bad. And from that point on, John trusted me. I said, you can't leave an Olympic gold medalist in the ring while you're flipping him out with Arthur from the hot dog stand down the street. It's not going to fly.
One of the best backstage fights ever, and I didn't see it, was Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero. And I'm dressing by Eddie Guerrero back in the dressing room, and I could hear the fight coming down the hall, and you know it's a fight. You know what's going. You know there's a fight happening. So I figured out by all of the what's yelling back and forth that Eddie had tried to leg dive Kurt in the gorilla position when he came back. So now they get to the door, and Laurinaitis shuts the door and separates Eddie from Kurt, who's outside the dressing room. Now Eddie comes and sits right by me right here, and Eddie's just looking at the door, and he's I'm sitting here looking at him, and finally I said, Eddie, why would you leg dive a gold medalist?
Oh,
and Eddie goes, because I'm stupid. All right. Now we're good.
that's it. That's vintage Eddie Guerrero.
Yes. Yeah.
He was over it and already realized he fucked up, right?
That's right.
Excuse
Yeah.
my language.
Yeah.
That he made a mistake.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But let me ask you, I know you've been asked this a million times. Your iteration, when you say Four Horsemen, who do you put in the Four Horsemen?
I'm asked this a lot, and it's the same answer every time. It is hard to duplicate something that is the first incarnation and gets over. So I would say Ole, that version. Now, from a performance standpoint, for all the guys in the other room, Barry Windham's your pick. Yeah. He was just so good. And that's the two that I feel like were the most effective.
Do you think Barry Windham gets overlooked a lot of times? I mean, from the very beginning, when Blackjack Mulligan came to my brother and I, and JBL gets be creative at it. What do you call it?
Lucifer and Satan. So Blackjack Mulligan. Listen to this. Now, wait. Now, you know, Blackjack Mulligan is not a dumb person, right? He's not a dumb person. He gave Barry Windham to Lucifer and his
17-year-old.
A 17-year-old Barry Windham to Lucifer and his brother Satan and said, would you guys take care of him?
We must have done a pretty good job. He's in every damn Hall of Fame there is in the country.
He did it.
He did. He come to us in Greensboro, North Carolina, and he said, my son's breaking into business. Well, you guys book him in Florida and take care of him. I'm going to give him to you guys now. And Jack told Blackjack, he said, as long as you stay out of our business, we'll take care of him. And Black said, I'll give you my word. I think he's afraid of Jack. So not me, but afraid of Jack. And as a lot of people were. But he said, yeah, I'll stay out. But you guys do a good job. And if he F's up, make sure you tell me. Well, we weren't going to pursue Barry up because we needed a driver. We needed a young guy. We needed bait.
He's the driver. Yeah. Only way I can explain it, if you've ever been in the ring with Brad Armstrong.
That's another guy that totally overlooked. The Armstrong family is so great. Jack and Brad Armstrong, for that time, had the highest rating ever on TBS in a non-title match where if Brad went a certain amount of time with Jack, he got a world title match at the Omni, and they went 15 minutes, and Brad got his match. And it was the highest rated segment in TBS.
He was as good as anybody ever has been from a performance standpoint. Barry Windham was a 6'6", 250-pound Brad Armstrong. He's like a gazelle out there. He was so smooth that just you get in there. It's like guys like him and Bobby Eaton and Brad Armstrong. It's like you get in there and Ricky Morton, and you just go, God, ain't this great?
Hey, that's when working becomes fun, right?
Absolutely. This is what I signed up for.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys must have loved Ricky and Robert.
Oh my God. I had more grandmothers break wooden walking canes over my back over Ricky Morton. It's like there was a lady, she had a nickname, Spider, was in Columbia, South Carolina at the township. She was always ringside. Every show that I could, that I'd see her out there, I'd throw Ricky Morton out there right at her feet, go right to the rail and shove his head through that railing. Brother, one day she just couldn't take it. And she stood up. I saw her standing up, and I looked up, and brother, brother, she broke that cane across my head, laced me open. I took a powder all the way back to the locker room. Well, after we showered, the show was over. I went outside, and she was waiting with a pecan pie. Arn, I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. Hey, Fabe.
Yeah. Well, was the pie good?
I was great. Ate it on the way home.
Of course.
Fingered it.
And show them your finger. I mean, Arn's got a unique
Couldn't
hand.
do it with this hand now. I'd have to go here. The old days, it was awesome.
The old days, and you mentioned the Road Warriors. I mean, we joked about the Road Warrior pop later, but that Road Warrior pop was legit.
Yeah.
I mean, when people talk about the greatest tag teams, I always think they figure out who's second behind the Road Warriors.
Second, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's, God, they finally, one time, Road Warriors had slaughtered every combination that was available, and they finally, since there was 5 of us, before the Chicago, I think 90, would it have been 87, Chi-Town Heat, Chicago, Blanchard Anderson versus the Road Warriors. But they backed out 2 weeks and let the 5 of us get to them. And we left them down 2 weeks in a row. And in those days, if that meant something, you didn't have to beat them. The fact that you were just walking around and them down was enough. We get to Chicago and that music hit. That's their hometown, right?
Yeah.
I looked at Tully and he's doing the back across the ring, being Tully, your buddy. And I looked at him, I went, this is gonna be bad. This is gonna be real bad. It was.
We worked with him in Chicago one time, years later, me and Ron comes in and goes, what we doing? I said, I guess we're going over. Animal's still in there with Vince.
Oh. I know what that conversation was.
No kidding. But they were that over. They were that good. I mean, it's amazing, transformative tag teams and transformative anything comes along every once in a while, and they were one that came along that transformed the entire tag team landscape.
Yeah, and they were fortunate enough that they had, like Midnight Express, different teams that knew how to work with the Road Warriors. You just keep them mowing you down till you're ready. 2 or 3 minutes of heat, you go home. It's a formula that never failed. Just had to make them what everybody expected. Make them the Road Warriors.
Arn, you worked a lot of tag teams, had a lot of partners, and I hate this question too, but I'm probably going to end up asking you. We were fortunate enough to come along at a time where there are a lot of great tag teams. I mean, just every territory had the rock and roll, the midnight. I call them the hair team back in the day. They all had that rock and roll hair. And I was always jealous of that. But we were fortunate enough where we had all those outstanding tag teams. I enjoyed working with every one of them, and it's a hard question with who was your favorite guys to work with, but. There's so many of them, but what was some instead of who was your favorite guy? What was your favorite matches in your long, great career?
Well, everybody that ever worked with Ricky Morton, they'll all say that's one of their best experiences because you look 12 years old. I mean, you're beating up a child, which got heat in those days. But the Rockers, I think a guy that did get shortchanged, he didn't handle his business probably the greatest at all times, but Marty Jannetty of that team was damn good.
I always thought Marty was one of those guys that was just a utility guy that could do anything you want. If you wanted him main event, he could go main event. If you wanted him putting over somebody, he would put over somebody and make the guy and make himself in the ring too.
100%. The WWF's Road Warriors were demolition at the time, and they worked really, really strong. Barry Darso is one of my oldest friends in the business, and Tully and I worked with them, and we had gotten a big enough push, and then we did the screw job using the giant, the chair. You remember that deal? And we got the titles off of them, and then we started the loops around. And this was really unheard of at the time. We did a thing where Barry Darso, mowed me down with a tackle and hit the ropes by Tully. Tully caught him in the back with a knee, and he sold off. Barry let me stand him straight up with a vertical suplex. That just wasn't done in those days.
Right.
I can see you trying to get that across to Bill. I think Bill would have went for that, but Barry did. And stuff like that, even though when he landed and a scramble covered him, he kicked out and kicked out strong. Everybody was made off that one spot. The fact that I could get him in that position was second only to the fact that he kicked out of it. So that's a big something, a feather I put in my cap.
And rightfully so, too.
Anytime you had a combination with Dusty, say what you want about Dusty, and he was over.
He was over. Man, was he over.
Put him with Magnum or put him with anybody, Manny, or give him an opponent, and you had an automatic one for your record books.
Yeah. We were so fortunate, like I say. I mean, every era thinks they're the greatest one, but you look back now and then just the names, the Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flairs, the Jack Briscoes, the Ole Andersons, guys like that just were mainstays in our business. Bill Watts. And Bill Watts was a great guy to work with, too. I mean, he was an Ole Anderson type, beat the crap out of you until you fought back, then he was a true heel. And John Layfield as a heel, it takes, as you know, Arn, you were a quality heel. You got to want to be a heel, and that's what's missing today. Nobody wants to be a real heel, and when you're a real heel, that's when you get the heat. And John talked about being a heel, what the qualities of being a heel all the time, and it takes a certain person with certain qualities in him, and somebody don't care about if you're selling a T-shirt or selling a souvenir. You just pass that by and be a heel. Was that your mindset too? I would love being a heel. Would you like being a heel or what?
Oh, I love it.
I did too. About a little bit of time I was there.
And there was no better feeling than to get knocked on your ass, start out on the top of the baby face, have him turn it around, knock you on your ass, roll out to the floor, and have you folks stand up. F you, Anderson, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, everything, cussing me with everything that you can, and being able to shut your fucking mouth and get away with it. And they go up to another level. In those days you could get away with some of that stuff, and that's all it really took to just ignite, because everybody in that section thought you were talking to them.
Right.
It was so much fun.
Do you think we could ever return to those days where you be a heel, a true heel?
You'd have to do it 24 hours a day, and it would have to last long enough that as a fan, I would say, well, this guy must really be an asshole, because too many times we cut stuff off too short. You're almost there, and then we go another direction. You know what I mean?
I think you can, and the reason I think you can is because you look at Conor McGregor or Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather almost caused a riot in England when he was fighting Ricky Hatton, was calling him Ricky Fatten. And, he's sitting there and he's grabbing his crotch in front of he almost caused a riot. But after the fight, he never came out and said, oh, that was just hype. He's, like you said, he was 24/7 heel, and he drew a ton of money. And he's a great fighter, but he drew a lot of great fighters who didn't draw money. He drew money because he was a heel. Same with Conor McGregor. The Paul brothers, they stay in character, Logan and Jake Paul. Jake Paul's a good fighter, but he probably can't be the top 5 fighter in the world, but he can draw $100 million fighting Mike Tyson.
Because he's a heel.
Because he's a heel, and he stays in character 24/7. I think that's the thing that's lost these days, is because there's too much access, and people generally, like you said, really deep down don't want to be a heel. Roddy Piper used to always tell me that. There's very few guys who really want to be a heel.
Oh, you guys tell me, the Paul brothers, when they walk into our world, are you kind of pissed that they got a free pass coming in? That's part of his heat, right? I mean, we're a loyal group here. For a guy to be able to walk in the door and be used the way he is, that's...
Oh, and he comes in and he tells you what a great athlete he is. I mean, he's terrific. I don't know how much of it is a put on, how much of it, I don't care. I'm entertained by it. And I think people are too. I mean, he gets an incredible reaction.
Well, yeah, apparently he's thought about it and done some rolling around before they ever showed up on that TV, right?
Right.
He didn't come in and just shit the bed, but because he had however many million Twitter followers or whatever, he got a free pass. I mean, the guy, like you said, not bad.
Yeah.
Does some pretty good stuff.
So, Arn, we're here at the Tregos Hall of Fame. You had a great induction last night, a great speech from your son. What all are you doing now with your son Brock, and what are you doing now?
Very little.
You know, Ron Simmons once asked him that. He goes, I worked a long time to do nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, we are doing, Brock is we're starting over again a little bit. He had his stint with AEW, as did I. There's a MLW, or AML, which is a Carolina-based group. This is the one that put on the Thanksgiving show in Winston-Salem. That's so good. Great company. You guys please support them. Brock, they're using Brock. We're trying to do all the independent shows we can where I can drive with them, which doesn't put a burden for plane tickets on the promoters if it's drivable. We're doing that, and we're just getting them groomed and working on mechanics and no flips and flops to the floor, any of that stuff, storytelling.
You were known for that.
The flip, flop, and fly. I don't think I ever even came off the top.
You're like me, Arn. Getting the foot off, getting on that bottom rope was getting up on.
Yeah,
I just too high for me.
Well, I was told something by somebody one time. You know, you can't win a match in the air. You got to wait till you get to the mat. So why don't we just stay on the mat?
Yeah, exactly.
Ron was watching a bunch of young guys practicing their flips and flops one day, and they go, Ron, what would you do if they called that with you? He said, tag John.
And what would you do? Clothesline the hell out of him, right?
Kick him in the face.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you said kick me in the head hard.
So, Arn, man, congratulations again, man. You've been gracious with your time. I know here at the museum we've been pulling you every direction, asking you to do all kinds of stuff. You've been such a gracious honoree for us this week. I want to congratulate you again, and since I'm involved in here, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and it was a pleasure having you in this Hall of Fame. It's rightfully so, and I love walking out there and seeing Arn Anderson's name out there. So congratulations again. Thank you for everything you've done for this business. I mean, not only as an entertainer in the ring, but the stars that you've helped produce backstage is so important. And sometimes when we get up in later parts of our career, that's what matters the most to me, was the help that I was able to share the knowledge with a lot of these young guys, and they appreciate it, and it's good. You see some of them on an event now, and they come up and thank you, and I'm sure the line is very long wanting to thank Arn Anderson, and John and I are in that line. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Mr. Arn Anderson.
Thanks for coming, everybody.